All right, so I am recording my very first reading for a horror convention, reading some of my own work. And it's very important that when you do these sort of things, you look like a Dollar Tree or Dollar General Stevie Nicks. How does the ensemble look? Be honest. I'm thinking it's a mix of medieval serving wench, Morticia Addams, and Stevie Nicks if she rolled around in a dumpster outside Dollar Tree, right? Okay, precisely what I was going for. A little bit of drag queen with the oversized pentacle hoops, enough makeup to make Emmett Kelly jealous, you know, kind of what I was going for. Yeah. Otherwise, if I don't paint on cheekbones and a chin, I look like this big washed out white moon. So the upside is I am recording it in the confines of quarantine. Due to the pandemic, a lot of conventions are now online. I think everybody gets a little anxious when it's their first time doing anything, and this is certainly no different, even though I am reading my own work and telling some of my own stories. I'm looking forward to it, and the nice thing is I don't have to leave my house. This here is my library. As you can see, there's Sammy, there is St. Dorothy's Bornak, and we also have Thoth, the patron Egyptian god of wisdom and writers and magic. So hopefully I can put together something that's kind of spooky and something fun and something folks can enjoy. Let's do this. Hi, I'm Lana Cooper, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my short story, Death Incorporated. The story is told from the point of view of multiple characters, the most important of which are famine, pestilence, and war, collectively known as the Three Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Actually, two of them are women. Back that up. Three Horsemen of the Apocalypse? I thought there were four, right? No, actually there are three that comprise death itself. You know the drill. Whenever things go corporate, they always downsize. So what do you do when you're an ancient anthropomorphic triad that has looked forward to the apocalypse for millennia, only to have it taken over by a corporate structure? Well, let's find out, shall we? Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in the following conversations are those of the individual persons, supernatural entities, and anthropomorphic manifestations of universal constructs interviewed here, and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of the New World Order Company, Nuco, or its parent company, Seven Deadly Sins Limited, 7D Ltd. These views and opinions are solely those of the interviewees, especially with regard to pestilence, war, and famine as individuals, collectively referred to as the Horsemen, the Three Horsemen, or the Three Horsemen of the Apocalypse, DBA, Death Incorporated. Famine, in his own words, on why Death Incorporated teamed up with Nuco. It seemed like a good idea at the time, I suppose. Pestilence, war, and I had been plodding along. For thousands of years, we'd been in the business of death. Busy seasons came and went every few centuries, but for the most part, these busy seasons were a thankless job. Basically, you kill off a lot of people in the same exact way for however long until it ended. It could be 3 years of a plague, a steady 7 planting seasons of starvation, or a whiz-bang of a war with severed limbs raining down for a year or two. Those long spells are pretty much paint-by-numbers deaths. Not a lot of room for creativity, just a lot of destruction and a lot of cleanup. In hindsight, I think that's why we decided to sign with Nuco when they approached us. We were eventually going to wind up wiping out a chunk of the population anyway, but at least with Nuco, we'd be getting something out of the deal instead of just mopping up pustule juice and playing Name That Fluid. Believe me, Name That Fluid gets pretty boring after a few millennia. We worked out a deal. Corner offices with a nice view, hourly rate plus performance bonuses, salary is for chumps, and a few other perks. Then they brought in likeness marketing and licensing to the table, which is where we figured we could really cash in. The action figures were the high point, though. We probably should have read the fine print or gotten some legal counsel to review the Nuco contract before we signed on the dotted line. The 55-hour work weeks were a cinch. Truth be told, we'd always worked odd hours, so capping it at 55 hours with overtime pay was just gravy. But it was the corporate extracurriculars that sucked the high holy one. Mandatory charity events, public relations stunts, and the television series. None of these things were covered under our 55-hour work week, and they sure as shit didn't count as overtime. Right now, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, famine, you guys are the Three Horsemen of the Apocalypse. What do you need all that cash for? Well, I hate to break it to you, but unless you happen to be a beneficiary in your wealthy great-uncle Harry's will, a hired hitman, or an undertaker, death isn't all that lucrative. We Three Horsemen aren't angels and we aren't demons either, so it's not like we can call either heaven or hell our home. We serve a purpose, and like any other working stiff, we're confined to a specific office space, that office space being Earth. We're supernatural beings, but it doesn't mean that we don't need a place to hang our hats. So Nuco provided us with housing. They were pretty sweet digs, too. The catch was that the Three Horsemen would have to share a house together, and we'd be videotaped 24/7 as part of our own reality television series in the house. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I think we first started to realize that we made a big mistake on the day the powers that be called us in for an image overhaul. Pestilence, in her own words, on the Horseman's new house. Whee! I screamed, jumping up on the king-size bed in my own room. My own room! I ran up to War, grabbed her by the gauntlet, and dragged her over to the antique apothecary cabinet that displayed tiny samples of my children in beautiful glass vials. Look at this, I squealed, and they're alphabetized! I ran over to the wall opposite the one with the huge flat-screen TV and noticed it was covered in spores. Not just faux finish painted on spores, real spores! I heard a clanging coming from the front of the house, followed by a sharp wheezing from Famine. Have you seen the kitchen? He cried. War and I ran to the room and saw a beautiful marble kitchen island with an array of copper pots suspended above it. There was a cherrywood butcher's block and a cutting board, Famine exclaimed. Suddenly, a pleasant female voice sounded over the mansion's intercom. Would the Three Horsemen gather in the living room, please? The Three Horsemen to the living room, please. Thank you. Well, at least it's polite, said War, striding towards the living room. The three of us sat on the couch as the 70-inch TV turned on by itself. Garth Reed appeared on the screen. Garth Reed, the head honcho, the big cheese, the grand poobah deluxe. Of all the powers that be in Nuco, Garth Reed was the most poweriest of those that be'd. Good morning, horsemen, Reed spoke. War elbowed me in the ribs. Confirmed. Someone's got a Charlie's Angels fetish. I heard that, sighed Reed. That was funny, though. And yes, I've always fancied myself something of a John Forsythe type. He smoothed a hand with a ginormous obsidian ring through his perfectly coiffed silver hair. He sat up straight behind the shiny ebony desk, decked out with an even shinier gold nameplate that said, G. Reed, Nuco, CEO. He was super fancy. All joking aside, I'd like to welcome you to your new home. Nuco wanted to make sure you have everything you need right here, all under one roof. I really hope you like your rooms. We tried to fill them with all sorts of goodies we thought you'd enjoy. I really like the kitchen, spoke Famine. Very happy to hear that, Famine, Reed replied warmly. You'll be spending a lot of time there. We saw you had such a talent for cooking. We absolutely loved what you did with Paula Deen. Aw, it was no big thing, really, said Famine with a wave of his hand. Besides, Pestilence helped. I smiled over at my buddy and gave him a high five. Well, you may have teamed up with Pestilence to give Paula Deen diabetes, but that whole Bobby flayed alive incident was all you. Kudos. Reed reclined pensively in his leather wingback chair, fingers steepled in front of him. That said, how would you feel about your own cooking show? Or possibly your own cooking channel? Oh, Christ, yelled War, hurling one of her metal gauntlets to the floor. Are you fucking kidding me? This goof gets his own TV show? Now, War. Reed's voice took on a calming tone, gently chiding War for her sudden outburst. This is precisely why we can't offer you your own solo show. Outbursts like that don't go over well with the FCC. War's mouth formed a thin red line as she simmered on the couch. Garth Reed turned his blue-gray gaze back to Famine. I'd be honored, exclaimed Famine, shyly staring down at his weathered tan boots. It's called Feasting with Famine. You'll have your own test kitchen and everything. It'll air weekly on network television, and there'll be different themes every week. Dishes from around the world, bites on a budget, love those leftovers. You get the idea. You'll have an opportunity to exhibit some of your own creative control, too. Famine's eyes grew wide. And we have something planned for you, too, Pestilence. And that's when my eyes grew wide. Famine tested really well with women in the 25 to 55 demographic, but you tested through the roof with children, young lady. That's why we wanted to give you your own show, too. Reed beamed like a proud grandfather, ready to dole out a pocketful of Werther's originals. Children really seem to take to you, especially the children of anti-vaxxers. We think it's the perfect way for you to connect with that segment of our target audience. How does Pestilence's Playhouse sound? I couldn't contain myself. I started jumping up and down. Then Famine started jumping up and down with me. And then War got up from the couch and stomped off to her room. After Famine and I finally composed ourselves enough to sit back down, Garth Reed filled us in on the details of our production schedule. This was going to be a blast! War, in her own words, on the snub heard round the house and her long-standing beef with Famine. I was wondering if anyone else was having second thoughts about this sudden and total immersion in all things Nuco. I sure got my answer. Apparently, I was the only one of us horsemen who wasn't blinded by the promise of TV shows or non-stick cookware. I couldn't take any more of that smiling butt-nugget Garth Reed staring back at me from the big screen and doling out more free shit than Oprah. I clomped up the stairs to my room, slammed the door, and flopped down onto my bed. So much for that one for all and all for one crap. Thousands of years together, and this is how it ends, with Nuco giving away TV shows like Ritalin at a daycare to everyone but me. Famine and Pestilence could have piped up and said, "Hey, what about war? Maybe give her a reality dating show and call it The Bloody Bachelorette with 15 men vying for her affections and she gets to slaughter them all." But no, they were too busy high-fiving each other to even think about me. Some friends, some horsemen, some mattress. This thing is really freaking soft. I snapped out of my inner monologue. I was war, damn it. I had to make a plan. For now, I was an army of one. Nuco already had their hooks into Famine and Pestilence. This entire situation reeked of divide and conquer. Something was rotten in the state of the New World Order, and I was determined to figure out what it was. But first, I had to check the room for cameras. I wouldn't put it past that sneaky shitbucket Garth Reed to have planted a bunch of them around the house to watch us. Reality TV show my ass. This was corporate espionage, and I would not have it interfering with the horsemen's duties. Screw that. Thank you so much for listening to this excerpt from Death Incorporated. I hope you've enjoyed it and even gotten a laugh or two out of it. Thank you so much, and happy Halloween season.